Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Oscar Buzz. Trevor here, joined by Thomas, as always. And today we're talking about Longlegs by Osgood Perkins. Neon's biggest opening ever. Very, very big thing, seen as the horror film of the year. We're a bit late on this for a multitude of reasons. One, including that the first time I tried to go see this, I had to leave halfway through because there was a tornado that coming directly through. And then I thought that I had enough time to beat the storm, the tornado to make it home in time, and I in fact did not, and then had to drive through a storm and thought I was going to die. But I did end up seeing this film, and now we're going to talk about it.
There we go. Yep, that's the major reason, probably. I mean, we should be reviewing Twisters with a story like that, obviously.
I know, yeah. Honestly, a decade from now, I'm just gonna lie and say it was Twisters.
Just say it was Twisters. Exactly. Yeah, you may as well.
It's same time,
Yeah,
close enough.
Pretty much.
But yes, so Longlegs, though. Listen, it isn't the scariest film ever made, as people were hyping it up to be. But as a piece of atmospheric horror, I do think it works quite well.
I think it works for the most part in what it's trying to do. I think there are a lot of weaknesses that hold it back, but they're not like fundamental ones. There's still a good film within, and it's still, as you say, if you like horror films, it's a very enjoyable experience. Like, I can see why people are immediately touting it as one of the best horror films of the year. I think it is. If that's your kind of bag, then I can really see you digging this.
Yeah,
but
it's a horror film made for fans of horror films, I think.
Definitely. There's just a few things in there that just like make me question some aspects of it. But overall, I'd agree. I'm fairly positive on it, if not a little underwhelmed by it being touted as this major thing. And then, but that's the nature of anticipation, stuff of that nature.
I mean, I think we both try to divorce expectations from when we're actually watching the film. But obviously that's, hard. Like nobody's going to be able to fully separate what they were expecting versus what they get. And again, I don't think that's entirely a fair way to judge a film, but it's how human brains work, right? Nobody's going to be able to ever go into a film with absolutely zero expectations, whether positive or negative. But yeah, I think overall, I mean, I had fun with it, right? Like I really like the use of analog horror, even if that I'll get into some of my problems with it, but on its own, this film has a lot of individual elements that work really, really well. I think the analog horror is really good. For one, I enjoyed Nicolas Cage's performance. I think that Nicolas Cage is actually a good actor who is a master at committing to the bit and will just go very hard for whatever direction he's given. And I think that I saw someone tweet this, and I very much agree that we live in a society. We live in a generation that is very averse to sincerity, and Nicolas Cage is one of the most overly sincere actors out there with his performances. Like, he is 100% with everything, with no room for like it being seen as insincere. And again, on its own, I liked his work in this, and I thought it was good. In conjunction with the rest of the film, I don't entirely know, but if that's the direction that he was given, he fucking ate it.
And I mean, because that was what you mentioned to me after, that maybe it is more on the direction side of things and telling Nick Cage to do these things and go this out there with it. But as I say, I just felt he was antithetical to the rest of the film around him. I don't think he fit anything else going on. And so I can't, in good conscience, say that he gave a good performance in my book when he feels so divorced from everything going on. It felt like an individual effort rather than a team thing, sort of all coming together to collaborate. And so, yeah, I just wasn't a fan of him in this film. Every time he did show up, he sort of took me out of it. And I think that is a major problem when that is a lot of what the film is riding is the menace from Nick Cage. And I just didn't feel it. I felt it was cartoonish, and I like Nick Cage and other stuff. I'm not one to say he's a bad actor. I mean, if you've seen Pig, it's amazing. But in this particular project, I think he was embodying a lot of the worst tendencies people like to throw at him, and I can see why people criticize this kind of acting when it is so in your face, so just what the hell. And I just don't think it matched what the tone of this project was going for. So
I can even get behind that. I do think that his performance does at points feel like it is part of a separate film. But why I don't entirely blame it on him is that because there are a lot of elements like that. Like, I don't think it was just him that took this direction and went rogue with it, and the rest of the film is this really singular, unified vision. Like, that isn't the case. I think that
No,
Nicolas
I can
Cage,
get behind that. Yeah.
like a lot of elements, I think it is quite disparate.
I can get behind that. My counterpoint would be, what film would Nick Cage's performance in this fit
a
into?
better film than this.
But I'm not sure it really works overall as this thing in general, as what he is doing with his voice and mannerisms. Like, it's expressive, and as you say, it is fully committing to the bit in a way that I tend to like to see. But like, yeah, I'm not sure this was ever going to be a character. If you're whacking this character into a horror film and you're not getting the menace from him, I just don't think it works. So it doesn't work as a horror performance, and therefore I do think a lot of the blame.
I don't know. I think
that
it
film
can work in a different film. I think, because I think a lot of it
very particular. It's a very
I don't know, but I think one of the biggest issues with this film is that I do think it has a lot of tonal issues. And again, I think if there is a really clear, unified tone that revolves around his performance, then I think that performance works really, really well. And again, it felt like you need to build a film around that performance, and it felt like this film wasn't doing that. But again, I don't think that the tone was that all that consistent. You know, even if you take Cage's performance out of it, like I still don't think the film tonally works. So
potentially not. I don't think the tonal issues with this are its most egregious flaw, though, and I would slightly push back against that idea that you'd need to build the film around the performance. I think the performances in general,
I think you need to, but I think you should.
I think the performances should be able to fit in. I don't think you need to build films, and this was my major problem with like Napoleon last year. It felt like Joaquin Phoenix was just on his own wavelength, and like, sure, if you're doing that kind of film, but that's not what Ridley Scott was doing. It just felt like the two cross-pathed, and it just never came together. And I think this is the exact same problem that I have, is that you can't, like, as an actor, you can't just expect the whole film to be built around you. And I think Nick Cage.
Well, no, but I don't think that's what he was doing. I think that he was given the direction to do this, and I just think that Osgood Perkins didn't entirely commit to tonally. But like, I don't think
maybe, but I don't think it's. I don't think that says it's a good performance, though. I don't think that negates the fact that in this film, what he is given, it doesn't work. What he is doing.
I don't. I think you can separate performance from film. I was impressed and enjoyed what he was doing, even if I don't think entirely worked. And like, I'm a very director focused person, right? I mean, the way that I view films is a lot like I don't get caught up as much with like the narrative or the plotting of a film. I very much interpret and like let film kind of wash over me as this like thematic and atmospheric and tonal tapestry, right? Like I'm a very director brain person, but I think if you're going to have a performance like this, and if as a director you want a performance like this in your film, like you have to make the rest of the film work around that performance if this is the type of performance that you want, which I think, clearly it is the type of performance that Osgood Perkins wanted. But I think you struggled to build a film that met the performance where it was at. I think you either get that performance and build the film around it, or you tell Nicolas Cage to do something different to fit the rest of the film.
I can see that. I mean, it's a valid argument, but I think that is placing the blame overly on Osgood Perkins, when that is like, it's not his responsibility to ensure that Nick Cage is a menacing presence throughout that he wants. Like, that should be Nick Cage.
And again, I think this might just be a director, like,
I mean, maybe,
I think
but
if a
like,
film is good, it's because of the director, and I think if a film has issues, it's because of the director. Which maybe isn't. It might be a bit of a flawed way of thinking, but I don't
know. I think it's hard for me to say that Nick Cage gave a good performance in this, when it is his aspects that are really dragging me out of the film. Like, it's mostly a very good film, divorced of the aspects where I think you lean overly into Nick Cage's side of things, and when you try and be this menacing, scary thing, and it's not quite coming together. The menace of the film, and the reason it is horror, is because of the atmosphere that I think is built up quite well in the first two acts. I think it does establish an atmosphere that is genuinely uncomfortable and genuinely gets under your skin. And so, I think Osgood Perkins, like, it's not a complete project. As you say, it's not quite this unified vision that I think he would have liked. There are definite problems there in the direction, But overall, I would still say Osgood Perkins did a good job with what he was trying to do.
Yeah, I think that he's a talented filmmaker, and I would be very. I don't know. I mean, we kind of talked about this with Ty West, and I do think that Osgood Perkins is a better filmmaker than Ty West, overall. But he is another person where, like, I don't know. I would be interested to see him like make a project that is a bit more narratively sound, because he has that atmospheric, like he can create an atmosphere, and he can build these horror set pieces without overly relying on jump scares, but having him direct something that maybe he didn't write, I think might be a bit interesting, or at least writing something with a bit more focus. And I know I just said I don't care as much about narrative, but I'm reviewing a film, so I'm going to talk about everything. That's just more, I guess, for my own work, which is why I have Thomas to write things. But like, this felt like he wanted to make 3 or 4 different films, and it just kind of the narratives just kind of like shoved them together into one thing, and it still kind of works, but there are definitely elements that just feel very underdeveloped and undercooked to me.
I'm not sure if I entirely agree with that. I do think there is a clear through line in terms of what the narrative is doing, and I think it is very it's a pretty standard one. Like, it's an FBI investigation into a serial killer.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think the problem is it's building up so many elements across the first 2 acts, and then it just sort of undercuts all of these by random reveals in the final bit that just don't work. Like,
sorry, this movie's been out for a week. We're going to talk about spoilers.
Yeah, like the magic or ball thing.
It was
okay, is that really the answer? Because that was it wasn't satisfying. I didn't feel like that's what it was building up to. It felt it was building up elements. It felt very overdeveloped in a lot of what it was doing conceptually. Like, okay, right, we're having the police officer's family, and it's her birthday. I reckon this is going to be the connection.
Oh, I mean, you clock, and you know that as soon as she mentions like her birthday, you clock all these elements very early. And I guess when I said underdeveloped, like, it overdevelops a lot of the film, but then when you get to the end, the thing that was actually important,
it underdevelops exactly the core mystery of it isn't satisfying, which is, I mean, it's a big shame, and it does take you out. And the third act as well, I just felt was like anticlimactic in many ways. I think the film just ends. And I would have liked to have seen more. Like, I think the birthday, like, actually in the police officer's family, like, this is where the third act should take place, and yet it's like a 5-minute footnote on the end of it, which I think is a major problem. When this is what you're building to. You're building to his last kill. There would be so many interesting stuff, just tonally, and just creating this horror of her sitting in this birthday, not quite knowing whether they've been possessed or not. They're getting it. Whereas immediately when she walks in,
personal, like, within her psyche and how we were portraying the horror, and it just felt very detached from that in the final third.
It felt so
really feeling along with her.
Exactly. It just felt, because as soon as she walks in, you just know immediately the police officer and his wife and his child are possessed by this thing that happens. Sure, but I would have much rather spent more time there, because I think the police officer character was quite well established. I think he was a nice presence throughout. It's not this random thing that it ends there. I think it makes sense. You've got that scene earlier with the family.
Yeah, I mean, they set the Chekhov's gun very, very early.
Exactly, but it's good, and it's fitting with these things, and then it just rushes through everything at the end, and I'm just left very underwhelmed.
It's like this orchestra that's building up this, this dissonance and tension the entire time. The strings are fucking going crazy, and then it just kind of goes out with a whimper. And it's very frustrating because you feel like you've been misdirected, even though no misdirection has happened. Like, it's very, very odd. And the final sequence with, like, talking, the voice, and I don't know. It all felt very strange. And the whole thing with, like, the mom character, like, again, sure, but I talked with we talked on the phone after I watched this, and it just, if you're going to incorporate magic, right, and magic is going to be how this all happened, like, make it, I don't know, make it feel rewarding, and don't make it feel like it's just, oh, anything can happen, none of the rules matter. Because, like, this was set up as, like, this, like, FBI, like
It's this
procedural,
gritty,
gritty
realist kind of thing.
investigation,
Yeah,
and had all
exactly.
this analog horror that was so integral to building the atmosphere of the film, and having that analog horror be so central, and I think some of the most effective pieces of horror throughout the film, and also some of the most interesting and creative. I love analog horror. I think that is where horror can be some of its strongest, especially in, this modern age where we're kind of like post jump scares and post, scary things, and the scary thing can be the absence of the scary thing, right? Like, it's working with a lot of these really interesting ideas in this contemporary progression of the horror genre, but it just feels like it kind of undercuts that by immediate, like taking out all of this gritty procedural down to earth horror that we've seen that made everything beforehand so atmospheric and terrifying, to then just be like, this is magic, I don't know.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
it
and
felt
because
like
it's a shame, because
it
there
just
are, as
gave
you
up.
say, there are a lot of elements that are like, I like the setup of the dolls. I think that's slowly sort of incorporated throughout, where like you're not sure if it's important at the beginning, and it slowly
Yeah.
gains an increasing performance. I like that stuff. I like the stuff with the birthdays, how that is subtly sort of sprinkled in, and then it becomes like the major thing about the series. I'm not entirely sure what the inverted triangle was all about, but you don't need to. I think the
Right.
concept works. It's intuitive enough where you just understand the basics of it, and that's all you really need. But then the core mystery, the core reason everything is happening doesn't come together because it's just not been set up at all. Like, we establish there's this ball thing in the brain, and then they just go, oh yeah, we're not gonna really delve into that. We'll just leave it. And it's just a Chekhov's gun that is just mentioned and then brought back at the end, but with
Yeah, I mean,
no
then
sort
they'll
of
just say like, "Oh, we can't do
closure.
anything with that," or something, like, with, like, the
Exactly.
third one.
Yeah. And then it just sort of comes back at the end, and you're like, okay, that was a mystery of it all. Because the mother stuff, even though I don't know if it was entirely well seeded enough, it makes sense. And like, who else could it really have been? There weren't like,
Right,
it
right.
did write itself into a
And again,
slight
it's
corner there.
trying to do stuff with religious trauma, which kind of works. Like, I mean, I'm very interested in religious trauma as a thing. That all the flashback sequences were very heavily giving Ethel Cain, who is one of the best artists alive right now. Go listen to The Preacher's Daughter by Ethel Cain, great album. Anyways, but like, it all feels like this string and this thread that is there, but like, I don't know, you can develop something while still being nuanced and subtle about it. And it feels like, rather than taking the risk of developing something and, potentially mishandling it and, doing it in an unnuanced way that then spoils the ending, they're just like, let's just not focus on it at all, so that way it's a surprise. And I guess it preserves this, these, I guess, twisty moments. But again, it feels frustrating. Like, this film frustrated me in the same way that Interstellar did, where I think it is quite smart, especially operating within the genre, up until it writes itself into a really fascinating corner. And instead of writing itself out of that corner, it just punches through the wall and jumps out of the house altogether. And I feel like, I mean, that's one of my biggest issues with Interstellar, and why Interstellar left me quite frustrated with how Christopher Nolan handled the third act of that. And I feel frustrated in the same way for this film, because I do think it's very smart. I do think it is, working with the horror genre, again, in this contemporary development of the genre, in an interesting way. And it writes itself into this interesting corner. And it just feels like there was no, like, I don't know. I really
Well,
don't
because it
understand
doesn't
it.
need to write
I
itself
don't
out of
at
a
all.
corner, because it just ends, and that is the major problem. It doesn't.
Right.
It's
It
not
just
even
leaves you in the corner.
like,
Like,
yeah, it's different. It just leaves you in the corner, which I guess you could say, oh, that's good horror, like it's leaving you in this place of uncertainty, whatever. But I think that's a cop out for a film that is setting itself
yeah,
up as a mystery, and setting the central premise of it is uncovering this
because
mystery. I don't
it
think you
isn't
can do
purely
it like
a
that.
tonal or atmospheric piece. I feel like you can do
Yeah.
that if it is purely tone and atmosphere,
And
but there
because,
was
yeah,
a
yeah,
narrative.
there are interesting stuff there, even with like the religious stuff, which I did feel was a little tacked on, because of, as you say, like it just sort of comes back at the third
Yeah.
act. But I did like, because they said at one point, like, oh, it's got to be, if he's using helpers, it's got to be someone that you feel safe with, and this idea of subverting that safety, that sense of security, into
Mhm.
something horrifying. I think that is an interesting ground concept to sort of work off, but it just kind of doesn't come together because the third act is so
Yeah.
underwhelming. And like I was mentioning that being tacked on, I did feel a lot of the elements of this did feel a little tacked. Like it's a simple story. Like it's a very
Yeah.
simple premise of what it is doing, which is fine. And I think it succeeds for the most part in being this fairly simple story until you get to the third act. But that aside, I think for the most part it works. And it's throwing on a bunch of different other elements to try and like elevate itself, to try and it almost felt like it wanted the mantle of elevated horror. Whereas rather than earning it, as films like Ari Aster, Jordan Peele, all of these, Robert Eggers, all of these people, I think their films they earn that mantle. I think this was trying too hard to get it. Even that is sort of exemplified in this marketing strategy, which has done wonders for it. It's making a lot of money, and I'm very happy for it. But it does it's trying quite hard to get you to be engaged. It's trying quite hard, and that's fine. I think we live in a society where. Sorry, I said that unironically.
You fucking did it too.
I said that unironically, which pains me to no end. But anyway, the point still stands that we often discourage hard work and stuff like that. But I think this is it's doing it in a way that I think is slightly. It just makes you cold to the whole thing, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. No, I agree, and I think I don't want to be too negative on it because again. Like I said, I think it's smart, and the only reason I think both of us,
it works.
The only reason that we're both as frustrated, I think, as we are with the third act is because the rest of the film is very good. If the rest of the film was just meh, I mean, like Maxine, if the rest of the film was just meh, we wouldn't be as frustrated with the ending. Just like we weren't this frustrated with the third act of Maxine because
no,
it's
even
not
though
like
the third act of Maxine is actually it's on paper a lot worse than anything going on.
Even though, again, I do think it is. It's just overall a worse film though. So we weren't as frustrated. So
because I still, as I say, I really like the concept of you're going back to the police.
This is just a testament to how much I think we did like the first two acts.
Exactly. It's a shame as well. I think the other reason we're frustrated on it is because that is the taste that it leaves you with, and fundamentally, that is often the make or break for a film. Is what it leaves you with by the time the credits roll. So
yeah. Last gripe: stop when you're making a film. Inserting unnecessary chapter markings throughout. There's no fucking point. All you're doing is just signifying for the audience, this is the first act, this is the second act, this is the third act. And there's absolutely no point. It takes you at I don't, it's so annoying. Furiosa did this shit too, and it pissed me off. It's one of my biggest pet peeves of film.
But even at least Furiosa was going for this epic scale kind of thing. I can see the vision in Furiosa. I can see why you'd put chapter markers in there. Here, it is literally, as you say, just a signal, right?
First, even kindness if it's an anthology, sure.
I mean, kindness, it makes perfect sense why you put those there. But here, there is literally no reason. The chapter titles don't play anything. It was like all of his things, I don't know, I don't even remember what they were. And that is the major problem. But I think that also reinforces the fact that a lot of what this film is doing does kind of just feel tacked on at the end, like, oh, wouldn't that be cool? But when you throw
it feels a bit try hard.
Exactly. It just means that you're taking away attention from the actual core stuff in it, which I think is good and well directed and well written, all of this kind of stuff. And also, we haven't mentioned Micah Monroe yet either, actually, and she's great. I will say
she's excellent.
Yeah, she is the star of the film, and I would love to see her in more stuff.
Yeah, no, really, really good. Other random thing, maybe two people are watching this and are going to get this reference, but early in the film, Micah Monroe is with her FBI partner, and she's like, oh, this is a house, which, again, first, it's kind of explained, but for some reason, she's, a clairvoyant, or, she can, see.
Yeah, I like that element. I
think it works in the end. It was a bit weird at the start, but anyway, she's like, oh, it's in this house, and then her FBI partner walks into the house, and he gets shot through the head. Everybody remember that part? Look up, there's a Twitch streamer named Jerma, and you cannot tell me that is not the same person. It freaked me the fuck out. Anyways,
I have no idea.
You have no clue who this person is. But for those who do, it was weird as hell. Anyways, Longlegs. I think that I'm generally positive. It feels like a really solid film that maybe was just a bit dressed up for film talk to like it. And Letterboxd to really like it, and it's worked. Film Twitter, film TikTok, or movie talk, or whatever the fuck they call it. Letterboxd, it hit its demographic. People who like horror, who are young and on social media, like it a lot.
I mean, just from anecdotally, the theatre was packed and people were
Same.
gasping in all the right places, and
Yeah.
you know, they are having the right reactions to it.
Yeah. No,
But,
absolutely.
yeah.
So again, I think it works. I think it does what it wanted to. I just wish it was smart throughout the entirety of the film and not just 2/3 of it.
Yeah.
But overall, again, I'm still feeling positive. I'm still feeling probably a 6 out of 10 for this.
That is exactly what I'll be giving it as well. 6 out of 10. So I still think, and as you say, since it hits the demographic, that is a demographic of those are the kind of people that tend to
Like
watch our videos.
if you haven't
So,
seen it yet and you think you would
yeah.
like it, absolutely go watch it.
For sure. But yeah, just it doesn't quite come together in a way that I wanted it to, sadly.
Yeah, for sure. I agree.
I was
And
really rooting
I
for this
think that
film.
Osgood Perkins, and I think that the film wants to come together in a way that maybe it doesn't live up to. So
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyways, those are our thoughts on Longlegs. For sure, I always think that when we do these reviews, they're going to be like 10 minutes, and then they end up being fucking 25. I don't know. We yap way too much. But those are our thoughts on Longlegs. You can follow us on Letterboxd and Twitter if that is something that you're interested in. But yes, plenty more reviews, awards, all the things they're coming up soon. So stick around for that. Subscribe if you want to, or don't. I don't care. But until next time, thank you everybody for watching. Stay safe and goodbye.